All stories on this channel are original content, fully protected by copyright and intellectual property laws. Any unauthorized copying, re-uploading, narration, or use of these stories will be considered copyright infringement and may lead to serious legal consequences. These stories are exclusively owned by this channel. Respect the rights or face legal action. This story was sent to me by one of my subscribers, Alex, from France, and I wanted to share it on the channel. When I was 18 years old, something happened to me that, looking back now, feels far more serious than I realized at the time. My name's Camille, and I lived in the Paris region when this story took place. I had just finished my bachelor's degree and was enjoying some freedom before moving on to higher education. My main goal back then was simple: to find a nice guy to spend time with. My dream was to find love, get married, and have a big family while I was still young enough to enjoy that life fully. So, in my naive excitement, I registered on a dating site called Grindr. Those of you who know it might already be shaking your heads. Yes, it's mostly known as an app for casual hookups, but at the time, I didn't know that. I was pretty fit and athletic, so I got a lot of attention quickly. My phone constantly buzzed with messages and notifications. I didn't think much of it. I was just a naive teenager who believed everyone online was as genuine as I was. One day, I received a message from a man I felt an instant connection with. We talked for several days, exchanging photos and messages. It felt different, like we really clicked. It was also around that same time that I realized I was gay, almost overnight. Meeting someone so soon after that realization felt exciting and meant to be. After 2 weeks of chatting, we decided to meet in person. He sent me his address in a beautiful suburban area filled with elegant homes. As I drove through the neighborhood, I remember feeling slightly nervous. All the houses looked expensive, and I didn't want to seem like some kind of gold digger. But when I reached the address he'd given me, my stomach dropped. The place was a complete ruin. The garden looked like a wild, overgrown forest, and the house was nearly hidden behind thick vegetation. I double-checked the address, thinking maybe I'd made a mistake. I texted him, and he replied immediately, saying he was outside. Moments later, a man, easily in his 50s and nothing like his photos, emerged from the overgrown yard. He smiled at me and opened a rusty gate. I remember thinking he must be the father of the guy I'd been talking to. But as soon as he grabbed my hand and kissed it aggressively, that illusion disappeared. He told me to follow him through the thick vegetation. The house's front door wasn't even visible from the street. It was hidden on the side, surrounded by trees and vines, completely out of sight. When he opened the door, it made a loud, echoing bang. That's when the nightmare began. The house was almost pitch black. The windows were covered with wooden boards nailed from the inside. Dust floated everywhere, and huge cobwebs hung from the ceiling. The air was thick with a foul smell, something so strong it burned my eyes. It wasn't like garbage or sewage. It smelled organic, rotten. Before I could process it, 3 filthy, sickly cats ran toward me, meowing loudly. I instinctively turned to leave, but the man slammed the door shut and locked it, not with one lock, but with several bolts and strange mechanisms. He motioned for me to follow him upstairs, saying the upper floor had been renovated. Against my instincts, I followed. The upstairs was just as filthy, except a little brighter. He told me to go into the first room on the left for a surprise. When I stepped inside, I froze. The window was sealed shut and barred from the outside. There was a mattress on the floor covered in stained brown blankets. Shelves lined the walls, filled with creepy statues of Disney characters, but they were wrong somehow. Deformed. Off. The entire scene was disturbing beyond words. He pointed to a small chair in the corner and told me to sit. I obeyed quietly. From that moment, I went into survival mode. I smiled, pretended to be friendly, and talked with him for hours while my brain raced to find a way out. He laid down on the mattress, staring at me, repeatedly inviting me to join him. I refused each time, politely, acting as if I didn't understand what he wanted. After what felt like an eternity, maybe 3 or 4 hours, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my roommate, and it had a distinct ringtone. I used it as my chance. "Oh, I didn't realize the time," I said, pretending to panic. "I have a party tonight. My roommate's waiting for me." I grabbed my things, thanked him for the afternoon, and said we could talk later. I just needed to leave now. When I reached the door, I realized I couldn't open it. There were strange locks, levers, and even a keypad. The man slowly unlocked each mechanism, entering codes and even scanning his fingerprint. Then he said he needed to get an extra key. He disappeared for 15 minutes. Those were the longest 15 minutes of my life. I stood there wondering if he was coming back or if he was grabbing something worse. Finally, he returned with 3 separate keys. He unlocked the final bolts, opened the door, and I bolted past him. I ran through the overgrowing garden, jumped the fence, and didn't stop running until I reached a busy road. That night, I blocked his number. But he kept contacting me using different ones, dozens of them for months. Then finally, the messages stopped. Years later, I realized something that chills me even now. That man probably wasn't the owner of that house. It didn't look like a renovation project at all. It looked abandoned, maybe even squatted in. And that smell inside? I only recognized it much later when hiking in the woods when I came across a decomposing animal left behind by a hunter. The instant I smelled it, I knew. The house had smelled like death. I still regret not calling the police that day. If I had, maybe they would have found out what really happened inside that horrible place. Thank you to Alex for sending this terrifying story. If you have a story, send it in. It might be featured next. This story was sent to me by one of my subscribers, Emily from California, and I wanted to share it on the channel. No one ever takes me seriously when I tell this story, but I swear every word of it is true. The backstory might seem long, but I promise it's important. A few years ago, when I was 17, I had just graduated high school and gotten my first summer job at a Christian camp near Yosemite in California. The people there were great, friendly, kind-hearted college kids who truly lived by their faith. It was the kind of place where you felt safe, surrounded by good people. Except for one. There was a guy I'll call Carl. He was tall, handsome, and charming, the kind of man who seemed to draw people in effortlessly. He had golden brown curls and a perfect smile that could stop your heart. But his eyes, they were completely dead. When he smiled, the rest of his face didn't move. No crinkles at the corners of his eyes, no warmth. It was like the top half of his face was frozen, an expression that somehow managed to feel both polite and predatory. Right from the start, something about him deeply unsettled me. His eyes, that cold smile, the way he spoke. He never asked for things directly. He manipulated situations until you felt like you owed him something. Every time he did it, it was like a door in my brain slammed shut. A quiet alarm whispering, something about this man is wrong. He was the kind of person you might save food for, but never walk into the woods to deliver it. Carl had this strange effect on people. The camp had small cliques, groups that hung out together in their free time. Everyone generally got along, but Carl had a habit of worming his way into groups one by one. By the time he left, that group would be in ruins, fighting, divided, and mistrustful of each other. It was subtle, but it was real. He didn't just ruin friendships, he poisoned them. Then came the day that still haunts me. One evening, the entire camp decided to go into Fresno for a night out. We were all tired of camp food and wanted to enjoy a real meal, maybe see a movie or go bowling. I had to work late that night, so I was the last to finish. At camp, we had a sign-out sheet for safety. Since we were so close to Yosemite, staff often went hiking and we had to write where we were going and when we'd be back. That way, if anyone didn't return, they'd know where to look. When I finished work, I wrote my name on the sheet, along with my destination and expected return time. Then I headed down to the parking lot. By the time I got there, everyone had already split into their cars. I didn't drive back then, so I laughed and asked if they'd forgotten about me. One of my friends said, "Carl told us you're riding with him." Immediately, a cold wave went through me. I looked around, but Carl wasn't there. Still, I'd seen his name on the sign-out sheet, right above mine. Something in my gut twisted. Every instinct screamed, "Don't get in that car." My friends brushed it off. They said, "Come on, you'll be fine. He's not that bad." Then I saw him, walking toward the lot, that eerie smirk stretching across his face. I'll never forget how he looked at me like he already owned me. I forced a smile and said, "Actually, I'm tired. I think I'll stay in tonight." Carl's fake charm instantly thickened. He smiled wider and told me how fun it would be, how I owed him something or other. His voice was smooth but sharp underneath, like a knife coated in honey. I refused again, keeping my tone light. That's when he snapped. He suddenly raised his voice, calling me names, shouting that I didn't need to be such a bitch, that he thought we were friends. I stood my ground. I don't know where I found the courage, but I just kept saying no. Once everyone realized I wasn't going to give in, I hugged one of my friends goodbye and whispered in her ear, "Don't ride with Carl. Please. No matter what, don't." Once the cars pulled away, I turned and walked back toward the main office to cross my name off the sign-out sheet, since I wasn't going anywhere after all. But when I looked at the sheet, my stomach dropped. My name wasn't there. The spot where I had written it, where I knew it had been just minutes ago, was blank. My name had been carefully erased. And the name right above it, Carl's, was still there. Thank you to Emily for sending this unsettling story. If you have a terrifying experience of your own, send it in. It might be featured next.
This story was sent to me by one of my subscribers, Wilfred from France, and I wanted to share it on the channel. My name is Wilfred, and I want to tell you about something terrifying that happened to me about 3 years ago. At the time, I lived in the city of Nancy, in a small apartment on the second floor with my boyfriend. Unfortunately, things between us weren't going well. We decided to take a break, and he went to stay with his family for a few weeks while I stayed in Nancy alone. If I'm being honest, I didn't handle it well. I could barely sleep at night, and my days and nights eventually reversed. I spent most of my nights awake and my days sleeping. One evening, I woke up around 3 a.m. after sleeping all day. Still groggy, I went to the kitchen to make some tea. While the water was heating, I stepped out onto the terrace to smoke a cigarette. The air was cold, and I stood there quietly, lost in thought about my relationship, feeling lonely and confused. That's when I noticed someone in the street below. I could hear a man talking loudly. At first, I thought he was just a drunk passerby on the phone, so I ignored it. His voice faded, and I turned my eyes back to the road. And that's when I saw him. A man was standing in the middle of the street, completely naked, holding a large knife in his hand. He looked to be around 50 years old, and his eyes were wide and wild. For a few seconds, I just stared, frozen in disbelief. My mind couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. It was so bizarre, so unreal, that I thought maybe I was still half asleep or dreaming. But then he started screaming. He began yelling at me, hurling insults, and demanding to know what I was doing there. I panicked, rushed back inside, and slammed the door shut. Even though I was 2 stories up, I locked the door out of instinct. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped the keys. I could still hear him outside, screaming and ranting, but I couldn't make out the words anymore. Then suddenly, he stopped. For a few seconds, there was only silence. And then came the sound of heavy blows, as if he were hitting something hard. I grabbed my phone and called the police. As I was on the phone with them, the man screamed again, this horrible, guttural sound that made my blood run cold. Then another loud noise, and silence. The woman on the line told me to stay calm. She said officers were already on their way and that other neighbors had also called after hearing the shouting. The man's screams had woken up the entire building. A few minutes later, I saw the flashing blue lights reflecting off my walls. I finally started to calm down. When I was sure it was safe, I went downstairs to meet the officers. They were already talking to some neighbors in the lobby. That's when I saw it. The glass entrance door was shattered and there was blood smeared all over it. One of the officers told me the man had apparently struck the glass repeatedly with his knife, trying to break in. The strange noises I had heard earlier, the banging sounds, had been him attacking the door. It seemed he had cut himself badly in the process. The final noise I had heard, that last loud thud before everything went quiet, was him throwing his knife. The neighbors on the first floor later found it on their terrace. The police said the man had tried to force his way into the building, and for some reason he was fixated on me. No one knew why. I had never seen him before in my life. I gave my statement to the officers, still crying and shaking. The night felt endless. As soon as they let me go, I called a friend to come pick me up so I could spend the night at his place. I didn't go back to that apartment until my boyfriend returned. A few days later, I learned that the man had been arrested, just a few streets away. Apparently, he had serious psychiatric problems and had escaped the supervision of his family, who were supposed to monitor him. He was found threatening another passerby before being taken to a psychiatric hospital. Even after knowing that, I couldn't stay there anymore. My boyfriend and I moved away as soon as possible. For months afterwards, I had nightmares and panic attacks. I couldn't even walk alone at night without looking over my shoulder. To this day, I still don't understand why he targeted me. But if there's one thing I learned, it's that trauma just doesn't go away on its own. For anyone who's gone through something like this, please don't hesitate to talk to a therapist. It really helped me heal and get my life back. Even now, 3 years later, I avoid going back to Nancy. That night changed me forever. Thank you to Wilfred for sending this chilling story. If you have a terrifying experience to share, send it in. Your story might be featured next.